Christian fundamentalist Bryan Fischer wanted to weigh in on the issue of taxes in America. Listen to this.
Overall federal receipts from the top 1% of earners rose by 1.3 percentage points to 29.3% of all federal tax revenue. Now, they control about 17% of the wealth, but they pay almost 30%, 29.3% of all federal tax revenue. Top 1% are funding 30% of the government. So rather than the poor and the low income and the middle class being resentful of these people, they should be kissing the ground on which they walk. Who's paying for the EBT cards? Who's paying for food stamps? Who's paying for the Women and Infant Children program? Who's paying for subsidized housing? Who's paying for Medicaid? It is the top 1%. So they ought to be given ticker tape parades once a week in all of our major cities to thank them for funding welfare for everybody.
He really does sound just like Jesus. Close your eyes. There it is, man. Jesus of Nazareth talking about how the poor and the middle class should kiss the ground that the rich walk on and throw them parades. You know, I wonder, has this guy ever read any part of the Bible? I know, like, he considers himself a fundamentalist and a literalist, like he believes every word of the Bible to be true. But he clearly hasn't read it. How many stories have we done? He goes on and on and on about being anti-gay, because he is gay, but that's a different story. Meanwhile, Jesus said nothing about being anti-gay. You know, Jesus never said anything about gay people. And then when it comes to the fact that the only anti-gay part of the Bible is in Leviticus, and then you bring up, well, Brian, that's also the part of the Bible where they say you can't eat shellfish, no crab, no shrimp, no lobster. You can't eat pork either. That's an abomination. You can't have on mixes of two different fabrics. You can't get haircuts. You're supposed to be put to death if you get a haircut. Bryan Fischer he gets haircuts all the time. Look at him. He doesn't have long hair. So if you really believe this stuff, then you would be angry at yourself. You would want to kill yourself. It'd be the death penalty for you because you always shave your face and cut your hair. You're supposed to die if that happens. You're breaking laws of the Bible, but you're only focusing on the gay part of it. And you totally disregard the main message of Jesus, of caring deeply about the poor and telling the rich, sell all your stuff and follow me. You know, let's go take care of the poor. Blessed are the poor, they will inherit my kingdom. The story of Lazarus, that's well known, how the rich guy who was on earth, when he died and he went to heaven, and Jesus said, no, you're not getting in here. And he's like, why? I thought I was a good guy. He's like, it doesn't matter if you were a good guy. You had everything you wanted on earth. You were rich. Sorry. We only allow the poor people in here. That, you know, the famous quote that everybody cites, that camel has a better chance of getting through the eye of a needle than rich people getting into heaven. But he totally disregards that. He wants you to worship the rich. And by the way, here are the real facts. Just 400 Americans, just 400, have more wealth than half of all Americans combined. 400 people, more wealth than 50% of the country. Mind-blowing. How about just the Walton family? So 6 people. They have more wealth than the bottom 40% of Americans combined. Insanity. How about the fact that the richest 1% have more financial wealth? So everything, assets, money, all that stuff. The richest 1% have more financial wealth than the bottom 95% of Americans combined. And this guy saying, oh no, everybody else should pay more in taxes, not the rich. But you're disregarding this. You know, this is the old Republican trick. They always talk about, well, look at the share of taxes in raw numbers that the rich pay. They pay so much already. But you're disregarding the amount of money that they earn. They earn that much more than the amount that they pay. You know, and half the numbers he cited there were fake anyway. And how about if you spread it out to worldwide? If you look at the world income inequality, the richest 85 people in the world have more wealth than the bottom 3.5 billion. You could fit the richest people in the world onto one of those double-decker buses, okay? Just a group of people on the double-decker buses, they have more money, more wealth than 3.5 billion people. That makes sense? We should tax the people in the bus less? The reason why they pay a higher raw number than everybody else is because they have all the fucking money, Brian. That's why. But on top of that, when it comes to a percentage, they oftentimes pay less. We always talk about the capital gains rate versus the income tax rate in the U.S. Mitt Romney earned $20 million sitting on his ass just from making investments. And he paid the capital gains rate, which is 15% or 14%. And somebody who works for a living, they actually get up in the morning and go work a full-time job and they create shit, that person could have made $70,000 a year and paid 25% in taxes. Why should a guy who's laboring for a living and making that much less money pay a higher percentage than Mitt Romney? These are things that he disregards. I mean, he's got such a skewed view of the world. And, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if we're talking about Christians, man, conservative Christians are a special group of idiots. Because if there's one thing that Jesus wasn't, it was conservative. He was as big of a hippie, pinko, commie person you can imagine. Here's a guy who makes Karl Marx look like Ann Coulter.